but it's nice to have you here. We're going to talk about everybody's favorite topic, which is fire alarm systems. This is where everybody nods their head and says, yep, I love it. My name is Larry Reitz. I'm actually headquartered in Denver, Colorado. But one of the niceties of my job with Jensen Hughes is to be able to travel and teach fire alarm. And kind of my whole goal is how to do fire alarm right. We need fire alarm systems. We want to rely on fire alarm systems, but there's just a huge spread of what's really out there in the world as to how it's working for owners and facility managers, and we hope to share some of that with you. No facility manager or owner can be an expert on everything in their building. In fact, the more you know about your fire alarm system is probably indicative of the more you hate your fire alarm system, right? So we find that everybody's experience is pretty typical. I get asked all the time, what's the best fire alarm system, what's the worst? Well, it's usually the one you have is the worst and the one somebody else has is the best, but the real truth lies somewhere in the middle. So the fact is these systems are important. They can provide a vital service for our buildings, for the occupants of our buildings, but they have to be treated with some care. And so we're going to talk about some of those considerations today. Particularly, we're going to focus on the four objectives that brought you into this session today. We're going to look at how do you know if your system needs to be upgraded or replaced. Maybe you're here today because you realize you're in that situation, and I appreciate that. And hopefully can pass along some information that's valuable to you. But we're going to look at how you can plan for a successful fire alarm replacement, because they can be very challenging, they can be very expensive, and very painful for the facility manager or owner's perspective based on how they are delivered. We're going to look at three different design options that a facility manager might take on, and some of the pros and cons of those different methods. There's no perfect way to replace a fire alarm system, but we're going to try to give you some pros and cons so you can kind of see for yourself how you would like to navigate the situation that you might be in. And then at the end, we'll take a look at the four factors that really influence a quality fire alarm system replacement plan and how you can be a part of that. You can help manage that, but hopefully find the right people that can help you do that as well. Now, they made me put this disclaimer slide. I am a code consultant. I am not a professional fire protection engineer. I'm a NICET 4 fire alarm designer. I'm also a certified fire protection specialist, but I'm not a professional engineer. Jensen Hughes is a company of about 1,700 engineers, scientists, and architects in 70 global offices. We love to perform fire alarm replacements, fire protection system replacements, new systems. That's the business that we're in. But my goal here today is to share some lessons learned and hopefully pass on some knowledge to make your job a little easier, because I've been in your shoes and I understand some of the things that take place when we deal with fire alarm systems and fire alarm system replacements and upgrades. So we're going to start about your need for a fire alarm system upgrade or replacement. How do you know? How can you plan ahead? What are some of the warning signs that you might look for that you need to be able to see to plan ahead? Now, nationwide, this is a common problem. There are thousands of buildings with aging fire alarm, fire protective, and other life safety equipment in them. They might have been installed in years past when they were the most modern equipment at the time. They were very good at the time, but now look through today's technological lens, you look back and you can see now some of the issues that were created at the time. In fact, they may appear aged or inadequate or even non-functional. You may have equipment that's not even working inside your building. Now, many things create the need for an owner or facility manager to upgrade, retrofit, or maybe even completely replace a fire alarm system. As age increases, troubles increase. Total system failures, unfortunately, are very common. Even partial failures of a system can bring a full system to its knees. Literally, one control unit card can bring a system completely inoperable. Many times, to add to this problem, is system components are no longer available from the manufacturers themselves that produce these parts. And so we have problems creating listed options or approved options to upgrade our systems. Many people don't realize that sometimes having a system fire alarm control unit master controller go down or some other major component may actually force you to upgrade your entire system. States like the state of Nebraska, the city and county of the city of Dallas, if you are required to upgrade or replace your control unit, you're required to bring your building up to code. And we see these local jurisdictions having rules like this, and sometimes an owner or facility manager isn't even aware that just by fixing a panel, they could be forced to fully upgrade their building to a modern code, which can be quite challenging in some cases. Additionally, there are other considerations where you may need to review your own needs, your own ability to adjust the system. Things like the change in occupancy or use. Maybe you have a typical B occupancy building, but your need to create tenants in that building have added E occupancies, like higher education facilities moving into a B occupancy, or daycares moving into a B occupancy, or ambulatory surgery centers, LASIK eye centers, and those kinds of facilities moving into what were just B occupancy buildings. Well, this very much changes the code requirements for that tenant, but may actually require much more to be done to the whole building. We have new life safety requirements like emergency communication and threat analysis for buildings. We have situations like active shooter, severe weather, and other types of events where we need to communicate information to the occupants of our building, but we may not have that ability to do that with our existing fire alarm systems. In interfacing with other equipment that's in a building that's remodeled, like new security or access control features, new mechanical equipment or elevators, does your existing fire alarm system have the ability to communicate or to handle some of this newer technology? We might have legal mandates that are placed upon a facility based on the type of tenants that are in a building. Or an insurance company, a legal risk person getting involved and saying, I need to lower my risk. I have a risk reduction mandate. That's going to require an increase in fire safety, either on the fire protection side or the fire alarm side. And then we may have significant building remodel or additions. And you know this if you're in this business. If you have buildings, building additions or significant remodels, those remodels need to be done to current code, but maybe your existing systems can't support that situation. So all of this becomes a factor in identifying this thing we know as the fire alarm system. So let's look at the top 3 reasons why a facility manager or owner would need to upgrade or replace, or to face that decision to upgrade or replace. The first and foremost is age. As with all forms of technology, the age of your fire alarm system is critical in identifying the need for an upgrade or replacement. Now, manufacturers, fortunately in this market, have built panels to survive, and we have some fire alarm panels. We'll see a few examples in this presentation that have lasted a very long time and still are providing useful life. However, some of the technology used isn't even produced anymore, and so we get into a technology problem. So what are some of those time frames? Well, in general, manufacturers of fire alarm systems create their systems to last for 20 to 30 years. That is the general lifespan of a major manufacturer's fire alarm system. So if you have a fire alarm system that was installed before 1998, it is time for you to create a plan to look at that system and either upgrade it or replace it based on the equipment that you have in there. That 25-year rule is a very solid rule, and it's really because of the major technology shift, and we'll see that in our presentation. Smoke detection. If you have smoke detection that's been in use for more than 20 years, you need to take a look at that smoke detection. All the rules for smoke detection have completely changed in the last 4 years. In fact, about 3.5 years ago, UL released all new standards for smoke detectors, like the one over my head right there. Those smoke detectors are built for today's situations, the burning and smoldering polyurethane foam that we see everywhere around us, in the carpet, in the padding on your chairs. It's designed, those new smoke detectors are designed to detect that smoke much more quickly. At the same time, they're also designed to prevent nuisance alarms created by common cooking nuisances. So that's the current testing that UL has been doing. And so any product that's on the market, if it's been installed for 20 or more years, it doesn't have that kind of technology and will prove to be a nuisance alarm creator over time. Smoke alarms. Smoke alarms are very, very important. They have a 10-year life. So smoke alarms are your single station or multiple station smoke alarms that you use in your very own home or that are used in dormitories, hotels all across this country. 10 years, that is the code requirement. All smoke alarms in this country must be replaced every 10 years. So do yourself and your family a favor. When you go home from this conference, pop that smoke alarm in your home down, take a look at the date code on the back. If it's more than 10 years old, take a trip to Home Depot or Lowe's this weekend and do your family a favor and get that upgraded. Same thing is true with carbon monoxide detection. Now, a lot of people think they don't need to be concerned about carbon monoxide detection because it's new to the market. That is not true. You need to be very, very concerned about carbon monoxide detection. The longest lifespan of a carbon monoxide detector in the United States right now is 10 years. That has only been true over the last 2 or 3 years. Before that, it was 7 years, and before that, it was 5 years. So same thing, if you've ever bought a carbon monoxide detector, maybe you've plugged it into the outlet low on your wall, that's fine. Take that thing off and look at the date code. I just did this in my own mother's house. She's 86 years old. I did the right thing. I looked at the date code, and sure enough, it was expired. So I went down and got replacement. Carbon monoxide is an increasing danger. By the 2024 edition of the IBC codes, you will see carbon monoxide requirements in every major occupancy group, A, E, all of the public occupancy groups. So we're going to see a huge increase in carbon monoxide. It's very, very dangerous. It's anytime you're dealing with fossil fuel burning appliances, hot water heaters, washers, dryers, dishwashers, HVAC equipment, all kinds of things are creating carbon monoxide poisoning all around this country each and every day. Deficiencies. As systems age, a system may experience increased troubles, including wiring and operational failures. During annual inspections, a increased number of deficiencies are found. On average, the average fire alarm inspection in this country produces a 2.5% deficiency rate. That's across the board. Thousands of occupancies in this country every day that are getting inspected. About 2.5% of devices go bad in some way every single year. The key is if you're having functional failures, do you have logs of this? Do you know which devices are more troublesome than others? Do you see a trend in the increasing frequency? And that may be an indication to replace those. Wiring failures. Wiring that only lasts for so long. You might have wiring that's compromised by water, by building movement, by crushing or pinching either a free wire or a conduit that happens over time. Wiring troubles create problems and deficiencies. And unavailable replacements. The picture you see here, you may or may not be familiar with. That's a 4100, a Simplex 4100 annunciator. The Simplex 4100 annunciator was released in 1988. The technology behind that is very, very solid. It is a very, very good panel. It will still work today. But if that switch, that light, or that control board behind that fails, none of those parts are available today for replacement. So you would have to replace that entire panel to get it back up to speed. And that's just one example. I'm not picking on Simplex. That's true with Siemens and Notifier and Honeywell and all the other major manufacturers. All of the technology created in the 80s and 90s is no longer available at all. So all of that technology needs to be looked at. The third big reason is a change in occupancy and use. As buildings change and adapt to new tenants and operations, the fire alarm system needs to change to meet those needs. For example, changing the use. So as I mentioned, you have a business occupancy, but you need to fill that business occupancy. And maybe you go to your local college, they need more classroom space. So you say, come on over, take over the 3rd floor. We'll set up the classrooms for you. You can do night classes in our building, right? Well, that just changed that floor to an E occupancy. An E occupancy requires a voice fire alarm system, period. So you may have to change your entire building's fire alarm system for that one tenant. Same thing with the ambulatory surgery center. You may not only have to upgrade the fire alarm system for that LASIK surgery center, but you may have to provide smoke detection in every hallway and every egress pathway for the building code to meet that today. Those are the kind of building changes that happen. Tenants, owners obviously want to rent out their building. They want to get the leases in place. But any kind of change of use, change in occupant load above or below, especially the level of exit discharge, and finally what you're storing in your building. That could be anywhere from chemicals that may be corrosive, or think of the increase in lithium-ion battery use, in e-scooters, all of those kinds of dangers that come with parking garages and those things we never envisioned even 10 years ago being inside of our building. All of these things lead to the need to either upgrade or replace our fire alarm system. So these are the top 3 reasons we would look to, that you should look to in your facility for upgrading or replacing. Now, facility managers have many questions when it comes to the issue of whether they need to upgrade or replace and what the proper timing of that is. So we're going to play a little game of question and answer here. We've worked with NFMT for a number of years now. They've submitted questions to us, so we've actually put a Q&A together. I'll show you where that's located at the end of our presentation today. But this is the 6 most popular questions, and especially as it relates to being compliant with NFPA 72. NFPA 72 is the National Fire Alarm and Signaling Code. That is the code on how to install fire alarm systems. So many people have questions as how do I comply with NFPA 72? And it leads to these top 6 questions. So we're going to go over these one by one. The first question is, when should my fire alarm system be upgraded or replaced under NFPA 72? Well, it would be really nice if we could go to Chapter 14. It would say every system needs to be replaced every 25 years, like I suggested. However, NFPA 72 doesn't address upgrading or replacing your system whatsoever, other than what you have to do when you do it. It's not mandating it. All of those are from the factors, the environmental and use factors that we just talked about. That is what's driving our fire alarm replacement or upgrade. Can the existing systems that you have, the system you have, handle an upgrade in an HVAC upgrade or an elevator upgrade or some other upgrade in the building? Is your fire alarm system actually capable of providing that kind of support for it? And then, do you have a professional inventory and an evaluation of the existing system? There are many professionals out there who know about these systems. They know about the lifespan of these systems. And they can come in and give an unbiased inventory. Do you even know how many smoke detectors you have? How many pull stations you have? How many horn strobes or loudspeakers? Having that kind of inventory can give you the information you need to know how to price these things and how long they should reasonably be expected to last. Well, the second question then is, if I'm told my fire alarm system is obsolete, does NFPA 72 require me to replacement? Well, the easy answer to that is no, it doesn't. There's no specific requirement to say you must install it. So you might ask, well, why would I replace it or upgrade it? Well, first and foremost, if someone advises you that the system you have installed is obsolete, you need to first verify with an unbiased professional that the information you have just been given is correct. I know that's a harsh statement, but there are contractors out there who will say, I work for ABC company and you have XYZ company installed on the wall and that thing's a piece of junk and you can't upgrade it and you can't do anything with it, so please buy ABC fire alarm system because it'll work forever, right? There are systems out there, so you want an unbiased professional, preferably somebody not selling a fire alarm panel, to give you an inventory, to give you that unbiased opinion of that. What happens if you do have an obsolete system? Again, how can you obtain those replacement parts if they're not made anymore? And what kind of situation will you get into if one of those critical boards goes down and now you are left without an operable fire alarm system? Anytime you have a problem where someone's trying to fix the system, right? They're taking duct tape or a soldering gun out of their truck. Now we need to really start to think about what we're doing and before we go any further. And we'll talk about how to avoid a costly emergency, a full system replacement in just a moment. Well, if I have a problem with my obsolete fire alarm system, why should I begin planning for a replacement when NFPA 72 doesn't require that? Well, if your system is truly obsolete and you have a catastrophic failure, then you're going to have an emergency full system replacement on your hands. And all you need to think of is dollar signs when it comes to that situation. Facility managers should always have an idea or know the age and condition of their installed fire alarm systems so they can plan for planned upgrades or replacements. A planned system upgrade will cost as much as 1/2 the cost of an emergency system replacement. The headaches alone are worth the planning in advance. The fire watch, the overtime, all of the other things that go into an emergency fire alarm system replacement are painful at best. Now, under NFPA 72, what are the steps necessary to upgrade or replace a fire alarm system? Well, NFPA 72, again, as an installation standard, doesn't specifically address this issue, but you need to be making plans immediately to address any fire alarm system that's over 20 years old, especially if it's nearing that 25-year limit. You want to reevaluate your system's needs to see what it is you might need for any new system going on in the future. To never allow a contractor to convince you that a one-for-one replacement of all devices and notification appliances will either be the right thing to do or that it will be code compliant. I cannot underscore that enough, right? If anybody uses that term to you, I'm just do a one-for-one replacement, we'll get it all up to date, you'll be fine. That is a lie. The codes have changed, the needs of our buildings have changed. We have to put some thought into this because what you'll find is when you get to the end of that and the AHJ can't sign off on it or can't accept it, one of two things is going to happen. One, you're going to have a very costly upgrade and change order to fix that, or two, a very lengthy, painful process to get your system back into a certificate of occupancy. The fifth question is, what is considered an impairment to a fire alarm system and how must an impairment be addressed? Well, an impairment to a fire alarm system is any condition that affects the ability of a system to provide the intended life safety of the system. And it differs from a deficiency. So let me give an illustration. If you have a fire alarm system that has 50 smoke detectors in your building, and you test those faithfully every year, and one of those smoke detectors comes up non-responsive or bad, that's a deficiency. One smoke detector, the other 49 are doing its job just fine. But if you go to that same fire alarm system and you find that there's a short circuit on the signaling line circuit that's communicating with those 50 devices, and now the whole signaling line circuit is down, so you're not communicating with any of those 50 smoke detectors, that's an impairment. Impairments are very critical because it puts the requirement, NFPA 72 says these must be corrected immediately or within a reasonable time from notification. The term reasonable in NFPA 72 is simply defined as without unreasonable delay. So you can read into that what you will, but that's what the code says. Now if you have an impairment, some additional responsibilities come to that service provider. They may have to institute a fire watch at the facility manager or owner's expense for both planned and unplanned impairments. A planned impairment might be a tenant finish, right? You're going in, you're doing, and you're impairing for some period of time a portion of that fire alarm system, but it may still need a fire watch done in that area. An unplanned fire watch is very expensive, and that's where you might have roving guards who have to walk the building once an hour. You might have to get a permit from the local HJ to make that happen, to provide the reporting. It gets very, very expensive. Additionally, the service provider must notify the owner within 8 hours of an impairment, and they must notify the AHJ of that impairment. So now it's not just between you and the vendor. The vendor is required by code to go and tell your local fire department that your system is impaired. Now the pressure starts to mount for the facility manager. This is also true, by the way, if you change monitoring companies. There's a lot of work that's being done out there right now. You're being monitored by one central station or one supervising station. You decide to switch for price or quality or any other reason. Well, when that switch happens, the supervising station is required to tell the AHJ that your facility is no longer being monitored by them. That is probably going to prompt the AHJ to visit you as the facility manager to say, who's monitoring your system? So keep, even from a simple technology switch, a lot of us we're losing our phone lines, we're losing our analog phone lines, we're having to switch to cellular or other pathways, right? That switch is creating a lot of angst in the industry as well. And then if we are performing a remodel project, how does that affect my fire alarm system? Well, the answer is, of course, it depends. It depends upon the size and the impact of the project on the existing system. If it's a small remodel, maybe you can get away with it. Maybe things will work just fine. But if it's a major remodel, then it's most inevitably going to require some portion of the system to be out of service for a while. You might need fire watch for those time periods when it's out. Verify if your jurisdiction enforces NFPA 241. NFPA 241 is the standard for safeguarding construction, alteration, and demolition operations. This is what's trying to protect our buildings that are under construction or under complete remodel. It's a very, very specific code. It provides a lot of level of safety, but we all know what can go wrong when we do in construction in an occupied building. Things can go very wrong very quickly. And then engage the services of a fire protection engineer or other industry expert, and don't rely solely on your contractor's opinion. Get a second opinion by all means. Get somebody who's unbiased, who can at least give you that touchstone, who can work for your benefit and not just someone who's trying to sell a system. At least get that second opinion to make sure you understand where you're at. So you get to this question, do I upgrade what I have or do I completely replace it? Well, this is directly related to the challenges that you as an owner or facility manager you face. Lack of funds, of course. Everybody has a problem with lack of funds. When it comes to capital improvement projects, when it comes to regular maintenance, there's nobody that just has all the money in the world to do what they want with it. Do you have long deferred maintenance that are now overdue for replacement? This is true for many, thousands of facility managers who during COVID deferred maintenance, and now we're at a point where we can't just put a Band-Aid on it. We actually need to replace it at a higher cost. Is your facility fully occupied? Is it occupied 24/7, 365? Do you think you can't do a fire alarm system replacement in an occupied building? I can tell you can. In a 24/7, 365 building, you can replace a fire alarm system. It's hard. It's very difficult, but it can be done and has been done all around the country. But it really requires a solid implementation and migration plan to do that. And do you know what you have? The lack of an existing system inventory can really be a hard hurdle to cross. If you don't know what you have, you don't know what it's going to cost. Nobody can do a cost study of what you have. So if your inspection company has been pencil whipping inspection reports for years and years, and they say you've got 20 smoke detectors in this building, and you go around and count, you actually have 50, then you've got some hard decisions to make when it comes to the price tag of replacing that. Again, think of that danger of significant component failure. You may not want to budget for a full system replacement, but I guarantee you, you don't want to budget for an emergency system replacement. You want to get to this before you have a significant component failure. We've seen clients who realized they had a real problem with their existing infrastructure, and so they went ahead and put in the backbone of a new system so that if any one piece of equipment went down in their large facility, they would able to be much more quickly to switch over to a new system. That's the kind of dangers that you have to think through with this equipment. What does the code require for today's use of the building? We mentioned how much has changed in code over the years. We used to put Hornstrobe systems in e-occupancies in our K through 12 schools. We cannot do that anymore. They must be voice systems. Every K through 12 school in this country needs to be a voice system. That's the current code. Well, similar changes have been made in all types of occupancies, including E's and A's and other types of occupancies. That leads us to this last point. Do you or should you move from a horn-based system to a voice-based fire alarm system? This is very critical because even if the occupancy you're in doesn't require a voice-based system, what does a horn-based system tell you? It tells you to get out. And are people very good at obeying that instruction? Not really. Okay? But a voice system can be used for so many other things. It can be used for severe weather alerting. It can be used for active shooter. It can be used for lockdown or lockout type events. All kinds of things can be communicated with a voice system at an increased cost, but at the benefit of your system occupants. So if you're leading down that, what needs to be done? Well, you can't do a one-for-one replacement when you're moving from a horn system to a loudspeaker system. It's two totally different forms of technology. You need a lot more speakers to be communicating with when you're dealing with a voice system than you deal with in a Hornstrobe system. All right, so all of that, we've gotten to this decision. We realize we need to either upgrade or replace. What options are there? And so we're going to discuss 3 options that might be available to you and might be advantageous to you and look at some pros and cons. Now, a building facility manager is faced with serious decisions on how to go about upgrading and replacing or replacing a system while maintaining a reasonable level of protection in their building. Now, one would think this is where somebody, a fire protection engineer or somebody would ride in on their white horse and save you. Unfortunately, that's not realistic. We need to have some thoughts in our mind. A facility manager has incredible stresses on both their time and their economics. They may know a lot about their fire alarm system or fire sprinkler system. They may know nothing about it. And that's not an insult. That just is what it is. We all have different talents. So when we have this pressure, often we see the experts left out. Think people like fire protection engineers or fire alarm experts. So we're going to look at the pros and cons of 3 different types of options that are out there in the marketplace today. We're going to look at what we call the vendor approach. We're going to look at the code consultant approach, and then we're going to look at the traditional architect and engineer approach and where those pros and cons weigh for each of those options. So let's first look at the vendor approach. Now, often a building facility manager will develop a strong working relationship with their existing manufacturer, their vendor, or their local service provider, right? Maybe they love their Cintas guy, or their Siemens guy, or their Simplex guy, or their Honeywell guy, right? They've got a great working relationship. Everything's humming along fine. Now, over a period of time, that vendor may note increasing troubles or deficiencies with the existing system, and they may work with the facility manager to provide migration solutions to them and to update the technology of that existing system. And that's great. That strong working relationship, that trust that you have is great. Now, the opposite also occurs. You may hate your fire alarm vendor, you may hate your fire alarm system, and you feel like you're really stuck either way, right? So both situations exist. But if you have this strong working relationship, you have this trust that's built up, the nice thing is by using that existing equipment to the best of your ability, it might mitigate some of the dangers you have. Things like UL listing of compatibility of issues, right? Being able to reuse pull stations that are perfectly functional from one generation of system to another generation of system. Reusing some existing devices and even locations, and maybe even existing system wiring. Many of the manufacturers build in the use of older equipment into their newer equipment, and that's a huge advantage to you. You're not doing a wholesale replacement, you're just replacing those devices that have reached their end of life. You may be able to be quicker about it, right? The whole process may be a quicker upgrade or migration. It might be fairly easy to negotiate. They may offer you a lease option. They may offer you financing, so you don't have to go out to a public bank or something to get a loan. It might be a simpler plan review and commissioning. When you're presenting that to the AHJ, it's simply moving from one system generation to another system generation. Usually that local vendor has good knowledge of the local codes. They may have a good relationship with the local AHJ, so it's a very friendly, a friendly relationship, and we can get this through very quickly. However, with any system, there are downsides. There can be substantial downsides when just relying on a local vendor. Most significantly, it leaves out the services of a fire protection engineer who could look at the whole picture, right? The factor that local vendor might just focus on their fire alarm system or maybe just the few systems that they vend. They don't know anything about elevators. They don't know anything about doors and dampers and HVAC units. They may be limited in that knowledge. So they may miss things that you need to be upgrading, or maybe you've already upgraded and they haven't considered that or adequately addressed that. They may provide a questionable code minimum one-for-one replacement design. This is where we see all the promises happening for a one-on-one replacement. This is questionable and can get you into trouble and can lead to problems with the AHJ down the line. The local vendor may not have the adequate design expertise to provide that. They may not have NICET certified designers. They may have inadequacies on their own design team. Moreover, the size of that fire alarm system replacement might need to go subcontract the installation to maybe a local electrical installer. Well, that could be good or that could be bad, right? That electrical installer that they pick may not have any knowledge of how to do a fire alarm system because that's different than high voltage systems. You might have limited system features or UL compatibility issues. You might be locked into that system, which again might be a good thing or a bad thing. So the question with this approach is, what could go wrong? Now I'm going to show you a few pictures of what could go wrong and what has gone wrong. These are all real pictures. I'm not making any of them up. These are real life examples of what's happened when it's done on a local basis without any kind of input. Often existing enclosures are reused when we modify fire alarm systems. Now, you may not be able to see what's going on, but this is an existing fire alarm control cabinet, terminal cabinet, that's been reused for a new purpose. And the thing that you should notice is this blue card right here in the center. Notice how it doesn't quite look centered? That's because it's been double sticky taped to the back of this control unit. This was just double stick taped in. They put the wires on it. That means there's no proper standoffs from the electrical back box, the enclosure behind it. You know, on first notice, you probably wouldn't have even noticed that. But if you have someone else inspect that, you realize this is a completely non-compliant National Electric Code violation. Eventually, that double stick tape will wear away. That card will fall. It could come in contact with the batteries below it, creating a spark, creating a short circuit that would either create a fire on its own or certainly damage the circuits that are in that. Completely non-compliant installation. Codes have changed, right? We have ADA codes that our pull stations, as an example, need to be installed 42 to 48 inches above the floor to the operable part of the station. Well, they clearly didn't want to move this pull station. It was installed at 60 inches, which was perfectly legal 25 years ago. It's not legal today. Well, they didn't want to chip away at their precious green, lovely tile that they have there. So they simply screwed a piece of plastic to it. Said, see, the operable part is now 42 to 48 inches above the floor. I pity the AHJ who tried to accept that. A true Band-Aid approach. This is a real picture. A friend of mine took this picture not more than 1 year ago. This is a sounder-based smoke detector installed in a hotel room. The HVAC diffuser is about 20 inches away from that smoke detector. The air blows constantly on it and was putting the device into alarm. So instead of moving the device or moving the diffuser or changing the diffuser's air pattern, they simply put a Band-Aid on the smoke detector to make that happen. This is similar. This is a fire alarm retrofit that was done in Hawaii. I took this picture. The device that was there was out of date. They had to replace it. They realized, well, it doesn't fit the one way, so we'll just flip it over. Well, the Candela rating, of course, is completely muted here. It's completely in violation of its installation standard, being mounted upside down. Yes, the picture's not upside down. The device is upside down, completely non-compliant. Now, I don't really know what's going on with this one. I guess duct tape solves everything. So is there a problem with the back box of this device? I don't know. I guess you can still pull the pull station, but I wonder how it's actually attached. These are all real examples. I collect these. I've been doing fire alarm system replacements and fire alarm systems for 28 years now. I have all kinds of pictures. This goes on. We can go on and on for days. These are all real, and I'm not making fun of anybody, but this is what really can happen, what could go wrong if we don't have somebody watching over the situation. All right, our second approach is the code consultant approach. Now, there are a number of excellent and well-qualified code consultant firms operating all around the nation. Many have a national or international reach. They may provide engineering, construction management, even fire investigation services that can be of benefit to a local facility manager. They may have strong assistance to a facility manager who may have limited experience with the various life safety systems in their building. They often can create a needs analysis in an unbiased way, reviewing the system, creating system inventories, looking at the lifespan of systems. They can provide specification writing and bid review, even award opinions to help you to be your advocate on their behalf, even providing construction management and commissioning oversight so we don't see some of those pictures that we saw before. And usually they can create a vendor-neutral design. So if you're in that situation where you hate your fire alarm system, you blame all your problems on that vendor or on that manufacturer, they can often create a vendor-neutral design which can be open bid, which provides some of the pricing advantages in that open bid market. But again, even this approach has its cons. Due to the national reach of some of these firms, a local presence may not be available. They may not have that local knowledge with the local codes and local AHJs. You may have increased costs if people have to fly in and do inventories. It kind of is what it is, but they can't be everywhere. They may not offer long-term services, and even these firms, they might be limited to fire protection services only, fire alarm, fire protection, fire sprinkler systems, maybe kitchen hoods. Maybe that's where they realm, but they may not be able to go over to elevators or HVAC or access control. They may be limited as well. There's going to be an increase in time due to the specification writing, an open bid process. It's naturally going to take a longer process. The vendor chosen may require every feature of the existing system to be replaced, right? There might not be any UL compatibility between two pieces of equipment. And now because you're selecting on price, you're selecting on ability, you might have to replace every single feature in your building. That is a possibility. The question though with this is what could go right? What kind of hand-holding can that code consultant provide that could help you with? So maybe your code consultant comes and they see this panel. Now, for those of you in the room who don't know what this panel is, you're going to join the other 20 people in this room who don't know what this is. This is a Honeywell panel. This was actually taken 3 years ago, right during COVID. A coworker of mine took this. This fire alarm system from Honeywell was still in operation 3 years ago when they arrived at this scene. I can tell you I've offered this up to Honeywell representatives. They don't know what this is, and they sure as heck don't have a replacement plan for this unit, okay? This is a complete replacement. But having that kind of knowledge is really an advantage. So a code consultant can come in and really take a look at things. They can look at the height of devices. They can look at the wiring of devices and say, can we continue to free wire devices, or do we need conduit? Do we need some other way of doing the system? They can create good solid notes on the drawing to allow a proper bidding process. Even something like a fire department connection and having a horn strobe at a fire department connection so it's being used appropriately and triggered appropriately. Being able to reuse things that have been abandoned. In this case, this is a fire hose cabinet that was abandoned but they needed a place to put the new fire alarm annunciator. So they were able to capture that, pull out the old fire hose cabinet. That gave them a riser from the basement to the first floor, put their annunciator with the audio panel in there. It was a great use of ability to do that. So having that extra touch, that extra ability to provide that. Then you have the traditional architect and engineer approach, the A&E approach. Working through a large architect or construction management firm is the traditional approach for most building owners when they're doing a significant or large remodel. Working through a team of engineers, managing the owner all the way from original design all the way through the commissioning process has delivered acceptable results for many years. They have a large breadth. This might be the safe approach for a facility manager because it provides some construction risk, some insurance risk. The ability to have somebody else manage this process can be a huge advantage. At really being able to look at all systems, structurally, mechanically, electrically, life safety, all of the systems holistically is what is needed. With a strong specification-driven approach, a general contractor leading the effort, which is taking off that burden from the owner or facility manager. But there's cons with this. You usually have long construction times. You might have a significantly more complex commissioning. They may even bring in a commissioning agent on your behalf. This could be overkill when you just need to upgrade a fire alarm system, right? This would be too far to go for just that. And it also may leave out the uses of a fire protection engineer. A lot of them want to do this on their own. And the design construction team may rely heavily or push compliance requirements down to the fire alarm vendor. We've seen notes like circles the building and says, please provide code compliant fire alarm system per NFPA 72, right? That's their design effort. Not really looking at some of those things we saw before. So the problem with this is you ask the question, what is going on, right? There's so many people involved. You've got this laundry list of architects and civil engineers and structural engineers, electrical engineers. You don't know what's going on. This is from a fairly simple tenant finish. This is the drawing. That's 120 drawings, architectural drawings, just for one remodel. Very, very complicated situation. This is a pre-bid log from a recent project. 245 pre-bid RFIs before they even got to the bidding stage. So this can really drive a facility manager crazy because of all the paperwork and work that's going on. Now, cost is always a significant consideration, right? When we've got these three options, there's much debate as to which one is the most economical. The vendor approach should theoretically result in the lowest total cost, as no other individuals or consultants or companies are involved. But without a competitive bid process, we may not know if we're actually getting a good deal or not because we're relying on the opinion of just a local vendor. The code consultant and traditional A&E approach provides that open bid and open vendor market, so we may get more competitive pricing. But again, that code consultant may lead to cost reduction because they can be very much more specific about the things that are being done. But the traditional A&E approach may be the highest cost, but that may be your only option, right? That may be what you need to provide for the scope, especially for large remodel projects. And it may provide the owner some advantages with construction risk and insurance requirements that can really help with that situation. Now, quality. The quality of the design effort will ultimately determine the long-term success, and it's equal with cost, although it's not always viewed that way. Having a fire protection engineer is very critical. SFPE says an engineer is the only legally authorized entity to evaluate fire protection needs and determine whether the design is appropriately based on a standardized or special approach. And that is a uniform industry standard. The Society for Fire Protection Engineers, NICET, a number of other NSPE, a number of other industries have signed on to this statement. Well, the worst approach is, of course, to do nothing at all. To bury your head in the sand isn't an option. Systems will fail, and your risk and liability increases as systems age. We do well to consider four major questions. What are my real needs now? and over the next couple of years when it comes to the life safety of my building occupants? What do I really need from a needs perspective? What real system problems do I currently face? Is it wiring? Is it devices? Is it control unit components? What is the real heart of the problem that I'm faced? What changes have occurred in my building? What occupancies? What tenants have moved in? What do you see happening in the future that might affect the design options I need to consider? And if I lead with a fire alarm upgrade, what other systems should follow? How does that affect the kind of design? Do I need to upgrade my HVAC or my elevators or something else in the building? So let's finish by looking at the factors for a successful fire alarm replacement to bring this home. Now, success in planning for a fire alarm system requires a solid plan. It really requires a commitment from all stakeholders, including a verification of what your goals are. Those 4 questions will lead to what your goals really are. But taking a look at the goals of life safety, of property protection, of mission critical reliability, of standardizing on equipment, right? If you have 10 buildings and one is Siemens and one is Simplex and one is Notifier and one is Kitty and one is Firelight and one is Potter, you're going to have a really hard time working with all those systems and having maintenance staff that can support that. Well, how can you do that in the best way possible, in the most cost-effective way? And ultimately, what's the operational cost of doing that? And again, we often look at the total outlay of cost with a fire alarm replacement, but we don't think of the long-term maintenance that may come with that. So let's look at the 4 critical things that deal with mission effectiveness and how we can look at this. 4 factors: design, equipment, installation, and maintenance. If we remember those 4 things, we can start to plan out what we need to accomplish. So let's look at those each one by one. The system design or a replacement design is clearly a critical step in operational reliability that can't be overlooked. Unfortunately, fire alarm systems are often designed by folks that don't have the proper fire protection background or even the proper code knowledge to fully design a system. They may have been taught one way and don't have any other knowledge. As I said, I'm a fire alarm designer. I learned horn strobe systems. I learned in New York City in 1995, I designed my first fire alarm system that was a horn strobe-based system in New York City. And I thought that's how the whole world did it. Turns out New York City has an entirely different code than the rest of the planet. All right? I had to figure out what else was out there. And that especially came true when it came to loudspeaker or voice fire alarm systems. It's a completely different way of looking and laying out a fire alarm system. Many fire alarm vendors out there offer to design the system for very little or no fee if you buy their equipment. Their cost is mostly in their equipment and they're just kind of throwing in the design. Well, if you do that, the old adage is you get what you pay for. It's going to come back to haunt you. So understand and verify the qualifications of any designer qualified, whether that's a vendor, whether that's a code consultant, whether that's a traditional architect or engineer. Understand that. Have they considered the big picture? Do they understand what you're going to do in your building, that you're going to have a significant remodel or a new building attached to it, or you're going to do an elevator upgrade down the road? What systems or equipment within the building need to be interfaced with now or in the future? And that comes into play with elevators and HVAC, access control, and whatnot. And what advantages will a voice fire alarm system provide for you, or what design changes are required to make that happen? Again, avoiding that one-for-one replacement scenario, understanding how can you put in loudspeakers that are both audible and intelligible and help you out, and what can that provide for you, maybe in the terms of simple paging or providing other emergency forms of communication. Our second is equipment. Quality equipment, not just what will work. Maybe it's good enough what's there now, maybe we can continue to reuse it, but maybe not. Now, the amount of quality fire alarm control equipment on the market has drastically increased in recent years. Many of the manufacturers have added voice, they've added networking, they've added IP networking, cellular technology, all kinds of things that we've seen. We have self-testing smoke detectors, self-testing notification appliances right now on the market. It's a huge amount of technology increase that's out there. That huge increase leads to competitive pricing. So it's really all about who's going to service you in the best possible way. Any designer you pick should have a good understanding of the various strengths and weaknesses of various manufacturers. They all have strengths, they all have weaknesses. And every fire alarm system, I don't care which kind it is proprietary. It might be more proprietary or less proprietary, but it's proprietary. You're going to be bound to the person supporting you, and how you manage that becomes very important. So having a designer who understands those strengths and weaknesses can lead to you getting what you want out of it. And what new technologies exist to improve your system performance? Do you want a self-testing smoke detector? Do you want an addressable horn strobe or addressable strobe or an addressable loudspeaker that you can control individually? What advantages does that give when it comes to the annual testing that you have? Would you rather use an $80 8-inch cone speaker that drops into a ceiling tile, or would you rather use the old 4-inch cone style speaker that you have to cut into a ceiling tile, use a ceiling bridge, right? Understanding what goes into that and how that will affect long term. And what are you doing to address carbon monoxide dangers in your public and sleeping occupancies? As I noticed in the 2024 codes, almost every occupancy will require carbon monoxide detection. So is your fire alarm system going to be capable of providing that kind of performance? The third piece is installation. Does your fire alarm vendor have the installation skills for a large fire alarm replacement? They might be a great vendor. They might be a great programmer. They know exactly what their manufacturer's equipment does, but they may be really bad at installing the system. And they may have to subcontract. Well, does the electrical contractor they pick or you pick, do they have that skills? Do they have low voltage experts? Do they have NICET trained installers? That can be a real advantage in the electrical contracting world. What if you need to use your own in-house installers? You're going to use your own maintenance people to do it. That's fine, but can they meet the schedule? Do they have the qualifications? Do they know what they're really providing? And finally, the best situation is where the design meets the installation, which meets the programming. If you can get those three people in the room with you, you are going to have a successful installation, because those three people will make or break the success of your fire alarm system. And finally, maintenance. Maintenance and inspection ensures the long-term reliability and operational effectiveness. What happens if you go and install this replaced system, but now you've just created yourself a whole much more work on the inspection side? I know of a situation where someone used a value engineering, scary words, right? Value engineering, VE, right? They wanted to install, the plan was to install 120 VESDA air sampling systems in this building, right? And you're thinking, that's big dollars, and it is. It's really big dollars. So they're like, instead of that, we'll install smoke detectors, spot smoke detectors. That's cheaper, right? They installed 2,196 spot smoke detectors to replace those 120 air sampling systems. Okay, it was supposedly cheaper, but now what do you as a facility manager have to do every year to those 2,196 smoke detectors? You got to test each and every one of them, whereas you would have had to test one sampling port of 120 detectors. Somebody made a good commission off the job, but that is a real life situation. Somebody wasn't thinking about the long-term maintenance that you as a facility manager or you as an owner are stuck with. Those are the kinds of conversations to think about maintenance, because the maintenance is where you pay off your system. You live and die. You live with the system after they walk out the door. Is there truly capacity for additions and modifications? Don't you love when you get to the end of a job and you're like, oh, you want one more smoke detector? Oh, I'm going to need another card to do that, right? Because they didn't bring any kind of spare capacity in the specification. And what is the test plan and who can perform it? Is the equipment they've provided so specialized that it has to be guaranteed, it can only be done by one person? That's the kind of questions you get. Ultimately, the testing and maintenance plan will increase the life of the system and provide the optimal return on investment that you install for that system. So some final thoughts. There's obviously much to consider. I'm passionate about it. I like to help people with this, but there's a lot to consider. There's a lot that goes into it that people should think about. When creating an upgrade or replacement plan based on the principles we noted, it will guide the owner or operator through a very difficult, or what can be a very difficult and painful process. Again, creating the strong partnership between the owner or facility manager, the system designer, the manufacturer or vendor, the installer, and the AHJ. Again, getting those 5 individuals or 6 individuals in a room, making sure you're all on the same page, making sure you know them all by name, it goes a huge amount to increasing the success of the system. And consider that new technology that can be built into your system. Addressable smoke, smoke detectors that can test themselves. That's really cool, but only one manufacturer has it. Addressable notification appliances that can test themselves. Thousands of horn strobes and strobes can be tested in a matter of seconds, but only one manufacturer has that. So what's important to you? What new technology do you need to be building in? Because the best use of funds is always going to be a combination of these kinds of things to consider. All right, if you want more resources, I encourage you to join FM Prime. This is a non-commercial commercial for that. I write for NFMT and facilitiesnet.com. Periodically, you'll see my articles that are out there. If you join FM Prime, there's a 4-series ebook available out there. It covers a lot of the principles we talked about today. These are the 4 ebooks that are available out there that can be helpful for facility managers, and hopefully that can be helpful to you. I know we used all of our time, but I appreciate your time. I appreciate being able to be here. Please fill out the evaluations on your app. They don't invite us back if we don't get good scores, and I love to talk to folks. If you have specific questions, I'm happy to give you my card or happy to talk afterwards. If you have any general questions, but I know we're at 4:45, or no, I don't know what time we are. We're at the end of our session, so I appreciate your attention and just for showing up, frankly, and sorry I couldn't provide the bar. So.